The Council of Nicaea was called to discuss the Arian heresy controversy. So Arian was someone that did not believe in the divinity of Christ, was saying that Christ is not really divine, Christ is not really one with God. So the Council of Nicaea was convened to make a public church statement to be clear on the divinity of Christ. The Council of Nicaea was not to decide the New Testament books, to discuss the divinity of Christ. Many Africans think that just because Constantine organized for the Council of Nicaea, he's the one that propagated the Trinity. They think he was the one that sort of manipulated the scriptures for us to have the Trinity. This is further from the truth. The Trinity was something that was already believed by African theologians, such as Tertullian, as we've mentioned. Kinizana already believed in the Trinity even way before Constantine came. Fifth reason, these countries that I'm about to name had early forms of Christianity. Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. And even some scholars and historians believe that they were probably a form of Christianity in the south of Africa. So all these places, if you go there, there is still archaeological evidences that Christianity had its presence there as we go as far as the 3rd, 2nd century. This quote by Dr. Oden again is very helpful in understanding this. And he says, and if 20 centuries of presence do not make a religion traditional, what is to be done with Islam, which is younger than Africa by 6 centuries? Modern Christianity has been thought to have brought all the oppression to Africa, according to this mishapen memory. These countries that I've just named, Egypt, Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, are now predominantly Muslim countries. But then all these countries used to be Christian nations. Why do we reject Christianity that it is an African traditional religion? Because it's been in the continent for more than 20 centuries. If Christianity is not considered as a traditional religion in Africa, then so does Islam. That is a point that Dr. Oden is making, and I think is a very valid one. Number 6 reason is that some of the greatest intellectual contributors of our faith, of our modern understanding of theology, of doctrine, have all come from African places. We have Origen, we have Tertullian, Athanasius, Augustine, who's considered the father of medieval theology. All these people came from the continent, and they came from African nations. You know, the Trinity is one of the core understanding and teachings of the Christian faith. And guess who coined it? And guess who developed its understanding and helped us understand it better? It was an African, Tertullian. The 7th reason is that Christianity has always held a presence in Africa. Let me read you this note by a missionary in the 1700s that thought that he was going to Africa to evangelize, to preach the gospel, but then he went, and to his surprise, he found a Christian community already there in Africa. And we have record of it, and this is what he said. A few days ago, I received from a servant, a Berberine, whom I have in my house, such information that caused me great surprise. It is that in his village called Tangles, which is an island of the Nile in the kingdom of Nubia, which is modern-day Sudan, there are still some Christians, although they have endured many troubles, disturbance, and wars from the Turks to force them to embrace Mohammedanism. They, even at the cost of their lives, have always persevered as Christians and still hold in their hand a monastery in which there is a beautiful church decorated with wall and cloth paintings. This is a letter from a missionary to Egypt to a Spanish cardinal in 1742. Isn't this amazing that we have this record of this missionary going to preach in an African village, but then he went and found a community of believers in Nubia, which is modern Sudan. Amazing. Why is it that this knowledge of African Christianity is not taught, is not known, is not something that is cherished? I'll give you 4 reasons that I believe why this is the case. First of all, part of the reason why we don't have so much history of African Christianity was due to the Islamic invasion in the 700 AD, when Islam was beginning to take its place in the continent of Africa. So when they came, they took over a lot of the Christian sites, such as churches, libraries, monasteries. And so many of the records of African Christianity in North Africa, Carthage, Alexandria, Nubia, most of these places, they lost their Christian identity due to the invasion of Islam. Even though we still have sites and we have archaeological evidences of Christian imprints there, many of the records have been lost, unfortunately. The second reason is oral tradition. many African religions are passed down through oral traditions. And so there might have been a lot of data, of records, but because it was not written down, as compared to Europeans that have written historical documents, many African traditional religions do not, unfortunately. So many of the records and history artifacts, a lot of these things have been lost due to the lack of written letters and written documents. And oral tradition, if you're honest, sometimes they get lost in because it's passed down. The stories are changed. They tend to be unverifiable, right? The third reason is that this African history is not taught in schools. I have been privileged to study in Africa as a kid and here in the Western part as an adult. In both of these instances, I didn't hear of African Christianity, and even when it is taught, they started from the 16th, 17th century when the Europeans brought Christianity to Africa, and that we were all serving idols, we were all serving pagan idols, and then they brought white Jesus to us, and then we had to accept him. So that is where they start African Christianity. But when you look into it, my ancestors were probably even Christians, right? Because Nubia and Ethiopia are one of the oldest black civilization. The fourth reason is that the trauma of slavery by Europeans have deeply wounded a lot of proud, passionate Africans. They correlate Christianity with colonization, so they cannot see it separately, because Europeans did use a lot of Bible scripture to condone their brutal slavery enterprise. So this is something that is very unfortunate. However, we should not let this erase our history. We should not let this erase our identity, that Christianity was in Africa. Christianity is part of African history. So these are some of the reasons why I believe that this thing is so misunderstood and misconceived, and people oftentimes Africans do not want to consider Christianity as part of an African traditional religion. This rich history, unfortunately, is something that is put under the rug. But hopefully this video was helpful in enlightening us that, hey, God had never forgotten us Africans. God had never forgotten us. It was something that was always in God's plan. And so I believe that in the future, God is going to send many missionaries to the European world. I mean, now we see Europe is becoming pagan by the minute. Missionaries in the future will have to be sent from Africa to the continent of Europe, because Europe is, again, becoming increasingly secular. And for sure, there's a lot of bad things that some African pastors are doing in the name of Christianity nowadays, which is completely gross and unbiblical and all things that could be said. But the history still cannot be denied. Just because people are using Christianity to do a lot of bad things doesn't erase its history in the place of Africa. Some are doing great things, which is not oftentimes being propagated in news and media, but there are a lot of growing to do. But it doesn't neglect and it doesn't nullify the history and the good things that have happened due to Christianity. Hopefully this video was helpful. Share it, leave a comment, and let us know what you think. There are some things that I couldn't cover in this video. Let me know if you also know about it so that we all can learn from it. Thank you for watching, share, and see you next time.